I'm calling the title of this Bible study Asclepius and the Pool of Bethesda. Why do you want to do a Bible study on this topic, you ask? Well, I'll tell you why. This is why. And more specifically, this is why. Chris Bledsoe, in his UFO of God book, talks about people getting sick, having some kind of connection to this orb phenomena, and the lady and them giving him mysterious signs, visions, or dreams, such as hearing about a friend's wife seeing a snake wrapping itself around a pole in her room as proof of whether or not a surgery is going to go well or not. He takes this as receiving hidden knowledge about medical things, as if he's being used as like a conduit for healing by the lady. Upon reading this, I had questions about whether or not fallen angels have healing abilities. I never really thought about that before, so let's dive in and look up a particular portion of scripture that talks about this. This is in John chapter 5. This was originally going to be a notes from my Bible video, but it turned into a monster. So this is going to be a full-on Bible study. The healing at the pool on the Sabbath. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and the Jews went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of important folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool, but while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, and took up his bed, and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. In my Bible, you'll notice I drew a depiction of Asclepius, and I'll show you the connection between Asclepius and this pool at Bethesda. So this time, instead of me reading everything that the Google Gemini response had, I printed off the responses that Google Gemini gave me, and I'm just going to hit the highlights because I think reading all of it was just too much the last time I did a Bible study video. My first question to it was, is there a connection between the pool of Bethesda mentioned in John chapter 5 of the Bible and Asclepius? It says, the connection between the pool of Bethesda and Asclepius is a fascinating intersection of archaeology, biblical text, and ancient religious competition. While John describes the site as a place where Jewish invalids gathered, archaeological evidence and textual studies suggest that by the time the gospel was written, the location was widely recognized as the center for the cult of Asclepius. So there are archaeological evidences that this pool of Bethesda area was also a center for the cult of Asclepius. Excavations near the Sheep Gate in Jerusalem have revealed that the pool of Bethesda was a massive complex of 2 pools with 5 porticos, exactly as John described. Crucially, archaeologists found votive offerings, which are small carvings of body parts, ears, and feet left by people seeking healing, which was a standard practice at Asclepius, or the temple of Asclepius. That's really weird. Serpent iconography, and then also a Roman overbuild. In the 2nd century AD, the Romans officially built a temple to Asclepius over the site, but many scholars believe this was a formalization of a pagan healing tradition that had already existed there during the time of Jesus. And it sounds like it from reading the scripture. When it comes to the stirring of the water, in many Bibles, you'll notice that John chapter 5, verse 4, there's a verse about an angel stirring the water is either missing or in brackets. Most modern scholars agree that this verse was a later addition by scribes to explain why people were waiting. The miraculous water movements or bubbling were often attributed to the god, though some suggest it was a mechanical process such as priests opening a valve between the pools. But however, the Bible did say the angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. So there we have a question. Can fallen angels heal people? Because Jesus does not help the man into the water or wait for the stirring. He simply commands him to walk. This portrays Jesus as superior to both pagan gods of medicine and the superstitious rituals of the time. Who was Asclepius? Asclepius is the ancient Greek god of medicine and healing. He represents the aspect of the medical arts focused on the restoration of health and the curative power of nature. In mythology, he is most commonly known as the son of Apollo, and Apollo is the god of light and music, which is interesting because you hear of red light therapies or light therapies and music being a healing method. The cult of Asclepius. Asclepius was not just a myth, but the center of a massive ancient healthcare system. These were healing temples located across the Mediterranean. Patients would travel there to seek cures. Incubation was a healing ritual which involved sleeping within the temple walls. It was believed the god would appear in the patient's dreams to offer a remedy or perform a spiritual surgery. The snake was his sacred animal, symbolizing rejuvenation through the shedding of skin. Non-venomous Asclepian snakes were often kept in his temples. You'll likely recognize Asclepius through the rod of Asclepius, a single serpent entwined around a staff. This is frequently confused with the catechus, the staff of Hermes, which features two snakes and wings. While both are used in medical context today, the single snake staff of Asclepius is the historically correct symbol for physicians and healthcare organizations like the World Health Organization. The connection between the rod of Asclepius and the catechus, staff of Hermes, is one of the most famous examples of symbolic drift or mistaken identity in history. So there is a slight difference between the rod of Asclepius and the staff of Hermes. They both look similar. However, they mean something different. The rod of Asclepius means healing, medicine, restoration. Catechus, which is the staff of Hermes that has two snakes and wings, represents commerce, speed, and diplomacy. I had another question. Can you explain more about the votive offerings you mentioned in that practice? That's where it was talking about the ears and feet carvings. Votive offerings, particularly anatomical votives, were a core part of the sacred economy of healing in the ancient world. They functioned as both a prayer and a receipt of a miracle. In the context of the Pool of Bethesda, archaeologists found several of these objects, including a famous marble foot with a Greek inscription. These finds strongly suggest that even if the site was used for Jewish ritual washing, it was also operating as an Asclepian temple by the Roman period. What were anatomical votives? These were physical representations of the body part that needed healing. If you had a chronic leg injury, you would commission or buy a model of a leg to present to the god. Materials. They ranged from cheap, mass-produced terracotta clay for the poor to marble, bronze, silver, or gold for the wealthy. Archaeologists have found everything from eyes, ears, and limbs to internal organs like hearts, uteri, and even vessel organs like bladders. Some votives were surprisingly detailed, showing specific symptoms like varicose veins, skin diseases, or eye inflammations. The practice followed a contractual logic between the human and the divine. A sufferer would bring a votive to the temple as a visual plea, saying, "Asclepius, please heal this part of me." After a successful healing, the person would return with a more elaborate version, an ex voto, meaning from a vow, as a public testimony. These often included inscriptions like Tyche dedicated this to Asclepius as a thank offering. Interestingly, scholars believe these offerings served a social purpose. When a pilgrim entered a healing sanctuary like Bethesda or Epidaurus, they would see thousands of these limbs hanging on the walls or displayed in pits. That's gross. Seeing a wall covered in marble ears and feet reassured the sick person that others had suffered similarly, and more importantly, that the god was capable of fixing them. By looking at these fractured or diseased stone bodies, the patient was moved from a position of isolated suffering to being part of a community of the ill, who were all seeking the same restorative power. Finding a votive foot at the Pool of Bethesda is significant because anatomical votives are almost exclusively a Greco-Roman pagan practice. Standard Jewish law would generally view such carved images as a violation of the prohibition against idols. The presence of these objects tells us that by the 1st and 2nd centuries, the site was a syncretic environment where local Jew and Roman settlers likely mingled. People were using folk medicine and pagan rituals alongside or instead of traditional Jewish prayers. When Jesus asked the man in John 5, "Do you want to get well?" he is speaking to someone who has spent 38 years in a place where the air was thick with the imagery of Asclepius. This practice didn't disappear with the rise of Christianity. You can still see a direct descendant of this tradition today in many Catholic and Orthodox churches, particularly in Mediterranean countries such as Italy, Greece, and Spain. They are called melagros or tamata, small silver or tin charms of hearts, legs, or eyes pinned near icons of saints to ask for or celebrate a healing. This response brought my mind to another incident where Moses raises the bronze serpent in the wilderness to heal the Israelites, because it seems like it's kind of connected. So I looked it up. This story is in Numbers 21, verse 4 through 9. The bronze serpent. And they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom, and the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way. And the people spake against God and against Moses. Wherefore have ye brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. I'm not going to lie, this has always puzzled me, why the serpent imagery was necessary, or why this was used for God's command in this situation. So let's ask a question here. So my question was, what is the bronze serpent Moses raised in the wilderness to heal the Israelites supposed to represent? This is the response it gave me. In the biblical narrative, Numbers 21, the Nehushtan, the bronze serpent on a pole, serves as a complex symbol that functions on two distinct levels: the immediate historical context for the Israelites and its later theological interpretation in the New Testament. According to the text, the Israelites were being bitten by fiery serpents as a consequence of their rebellion. God instructed Moses to forge a serpent of bronze and set it on a pole. In ancient Near Eastern thought, there was a concept that the image of the thing causing the harm could also be the thing that provided the cure. By looking at the bronze serpent, the victim confronted the very source of their death, transformed into a symbol of life. The healing wasn't in the bronze itself, it was an act of faith. A person bitten by a snake would naturally want to look at the wound or seek a physical remedy, but they were commanded to look up away from themselves toward the pole. For those studying the New Testament or early church history, the most significant meaning comes from Jesus' own words to Nicodemus. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. This established a typology. Just as the serpent was physically elevated on a pole to be visible to all, Jesus would be elevated on the cross. The serpent on the pole represented the sin or curse that was killing the people. Theologically, the cross represents Jesus becoming sin. See 2 Corinthians 5:21, to take away the sting of death. In both cases, the cure is not achieved through works or rituals, but through a simple look of faith. The image of the serpent on a staff is nearly identical between the Moses story and the Greek god of healing. Early Christian writers like Justin Martyr were aware of this. They argued that the story of Moses and the bronze serpent was the original divine truth, and that the cult of Asclepius was a later distortion or mimicry created by other spirits to lead people away from the biblical God. It is also worth noting that this symbol eventually became a cautionary tale about iconography. Centuries after Moses, the Israelites began to worship the bronze serpent as an idol, offering incense to it. Because they had shifted their focus from the God who heals to the object of healing, King Hezekiah eventually broke it into pieces, calling it Nehushtan, which basically means just a piece of brass. So this was my study. I hope it wasn't too long. I tried to make it super short compared to my first Bible study video. I thought it was important to show how just because you're healed by an entity doesn't necessarily mean that it's of the God of the Bible. The fact that you can be healed by something doesn't necessarily mean it has to be from God. God could have created angels with the ability and knowledge to know how to heal us or to fix some situations or to have influence over some situations. So I felt like it was important and I wanted to share. Thank you for watching.